Hi everyone, this is Philip from Osprey Games, and I'll be running you through the rules of the Ravens of Three Sahasree. Let's get started with looking at how to set up the game. The very first decision you have is you'll have to decide who's going to be playing Ren, a young woman trapped inside her mind, and who'll be playing Feth, her friend trying to free her. Decide this any way you want, or randomly, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be setting up Ren here to my left, and Feth to my right. Next up, we take the 5 Raven cards in the deck, they look like this, and we'll put them to the side. The remaining cards in the deck are given a good shuffle, and we take one card, face up, and we put it in the middle. This is the first card in the Atman. The Atman represents Ren's dreams and is the main area where Feth and Ren will interact. Having done this, Ren now takes 4 cards from the deck, secretly looks at these, and places them in a column in front of her in any order she would like. These are Ren's heart cards. Finally, we take the 4 Raven cards again, shuffle them back into the deck, and hand these now to Feth. That's all we need to begin. Now, in the Ravens of Three Sahasree, the players will be looking to free Ren from the confines of her mind by repairing her heart. They do this by repairing Ren's heart 3 times across 3 rounds. Ren will do this by constructing the poem of her heart by using cards from the Atman that Feth supplies her. All the while, players must be wary of the Ravens who are looking to overpower Ren and eat her memories. Alright, let's get started. Alright, each round, Feth begins by drawing a card from the deck into what becomes the memory row. He has to always draw at least 1 card, or else the players lose. Having drawn that first card, however, he may draw any number more, just one at a time, revealing them like this. Right? And we simply keep on going until he is satisfied. Something like this, for example. Right. Now he'll want to make sure to draw enough cards that gives Ren the options she needs. However, he wants to make sure to also not deplete the deck too quickly. Finally, Feth will want to be wary of the fact that drawing too many Ravens will hurt him in the longer game, because after you've drawn the cards you want to draw, all the Ravens go into the Raven row over here, and they will start eating and stealing memories. Having done this, Feth now goes to play cards into the Atman, and he can play, again, as many or as few cards he wants to, and in any order, doesn't have to follow the order here at all, as long as he plays at least 1 card. Now, when he does this, there are 3 rules to bear in mind. First up is that shaded sections must always overlap shaded sections, and non-shaded sections, likewise, must overlap non-shaded sections. So this is a perfectly fine move, but this, if the mismatch here, isn't allowed. Right. Next up, when you play cards, you always have to overlap at least 1 shaded section with another shaded section. So for example, this is perfectly fine, but even though here the sections match, it doesn't have the requirement overlapping a shaded section, so the move isn't allowed. Right. If you happen to have a card which has the exact same pattern as the one below, they cannot perfectly overlap unless there's a card in between, in which case it's legal. And the final important rule is that cards always have to be played in the same orientation in the Atman, which is easiest to tell by the text at the bottom. So whereas this is perfectly fine, I wouldn't be allowed to do this, or in fact this. Right. Again, Feth will play as many or as few cards as he wants to, as long as he plays 1. And once he's done, he'll discard any of the remaining cards. Now let's populate this to show you a little bit how this happens. So we have like card here, another card here, another card there. Right. Now, when you discard cards, usually they just go in the discard pile like this. Easy. Doesn't matter, they'll come back next round. However, if a card matches the color of a raven, that card is stolen by the raven. You mark this by playing it underneath like that. And if that card remains there by the end of the round, that card will be permanently removed from the game. The exception to this is that the spaces in fact, in front of the ravens, to mark the safe area. Cards there may always be freely discarded, even if their raven is below. In fact, if you happen to draw a raven into the safe area, you get to discard that as well. So simply take this card and put it into the discard pile. With all of this, Feth is looking to achieve two things. First of all, he wants to give Ren the options to do as well as possible in her turn. But he's also trying to relive Ren's memories. And he does this by playing cards into the Ant-Man, so that he creates an area of the same color cards that overlap each other, where the total adds up to exactly 7. So, to show you a case that aren't allowed, in this case, they're only adjacent and not overlapping, so that doesn't count. Similarly, if I overlap but there's a card in between, that doesn't count either. But in this case here, made exactly 7, an overlapping area, means you get to relive a memory, and that has two immediate effects. First of all, the raven of the matching color, so in this case yellow and yellow, is chased away. So we put that aside, and I can't eat or steal any memories this round. If there were any cards beneath here, they'd go into discard pile, so no longer a threat. Secondly, if Ren has any face-down heart cards of the matching color, again gold in this case, she may immediately reveal it face-up, which will give the Feth player more information to work with, and will later on contribute to her scoring pile. Alright, having looked at Feth, let's now take a closer look at Ren. Before we move on to any of Ren's rules, let's first, as we relived one of Ren's memories, flip over an appropriate card, like that. Alright, Ren has two jobs. She needs to complete the poem of her heart, and she needs to match the Ant-Man to her heart. The poem of her heart is based on Japanese Dodoitsu poem, inspired by traditional folk songs. The poem has 4 lines, 3 of 7 syllables each, and a final one of 5. In the game, Ren needs to make 3 lines here. The total value adds up to exactly 7, and a final one that adds up to 5. In addition to this, she needs to make sure that there are no colors in the Ant-Man that aren't also in her heart. So in the current state, there's purple, green, and gold. That means that for that to be valid for the end of the round, there have to be purple, green, and gold somewhere among these cards. However, the converse isn't a problem. There could be also red among these cards and it not be represented, and that still counts as matching. The way she achieves this is that every turn, Ren will take exactly 1 card from the Ant-Man. She can take any card she can see, even overlapped cards. So, for example, she could take this card here. It's absolutely fine. Now, if she can add this card to the poem, she must. If she cannot, she has to discard it. To add it, she'd simply put it in the topmost line that isn't completed. But the total value of all the cards, including any face-down cards, may not exceed 7. If it would, you'd instead discard it. If not, then this card is doing 3 things for you. First of all, its value helps you potentially add up to 7 or 5 in the last row. And if it does exactly that, Ren player would announce the first row of the poem is complete. If the third row of the poem is complete and the 4th heart card is a 5, Ren would immediately announce that the poem as a whole is complete. Secondly, if the card she's added to the poem matches the color of the heart card adjacent to it, or in the row, she may now reveal it. Like that, and that gives Feth information on which values she needs, but also what colors are permitted in the Atman at the end of the round. However, to distinguish it from the card that was relived, we put it sideways like this. Finally, placing a card into the poem means that the ability is available, and the ability is this little piece of text at the bottom of the card. Ren may at any point use the ability of a gold or a red card in the poem, but Feth may use any card whatsoever, and to use it, they simply turn the card sideways like this, and then do whatever the card says. And each color card will have a different type of ability. So gold cards, for example, let you return discarded cards from the discard into the deck, whereas red cards let you discard cards from the table. Once she's done one of these two things, that is added a card to the poem or discarded a card, it then goes back to Feth, and you go back and forth like this until the end of the game. However, something that may happen is we might have a split Atman. Now, the Atman is considered split if there isn't a continuous path of overlaps between all the cards in it. So, for example, if Ren took this card, these two cards are no longer connected, and that Atman is split. Similarly, if Feth plays a card that entirely overlaps a card underneath, then that card underneath doesn't any longer count towards the connections, and that Atman is once again split between here. When this happens, regardless who causes it, Ren is in charge of choosing which section to keep and discarding the rest. So you may either keep this section or this. So if she kept that, hold it down, and these would all be discarded. This is a good way of discarding a lot of cards at the same time, especially useful for matching the Atman and the heart. But any cards that are discarded and again match the ravens, as before, are stolen by those ravens. All right, so Ren and Feth will go back and forth taking turns like this, with Feth drawing and adding cards to the Atman, and Ren taking those cards and either discarding them or adding them to her poem, until the board looks something like this, with the 4 lines in the poem complete, adding up to 7, 7, 7, and 5, and there being no colors in the Atman that aren't also present among Ren's heart cards. When this happens, Ren announces that the poem and her heart is repaired and the round ends. The first thing you do is any cards of her heart cards are face up because they were relived. You take those cards now. So remember the one we did at the beginning of the video. And Ren places those in her score pile. Any cards left in the Atman in the poem, including heart cards, are now discarded. And like when cards are discarded throughout the game, if there are any matching ravens, for example, this blue card here and this blue raven, they are stolen. The only exception is if you have any purple cards available to use in the poem, then you may now use those to avoid ravens. So you clear the table entirely. It's at this point that if any cards are beneath ravens, we now remove those. Those are eaten. You will never get those cards back for the remainder of the game, which will make it substantially more difficult. Having done that, any scared away ravens return. We take the discarded pile, and we shuffle all the cards together, and like we did at the very beginning, we put 1 card face up in the middle to start the Atman, and we give 4 cards to Ren. After doing that, we give the cards to Feth, and the new round can begin. 2 differences. The first is if either the Atman or Ren are dealt any ravens, those cards are given back, shuffled into the deck, and a replacement is drawn. Secondly, this time through, there will be cards missing from the deck that we removed, and there will be ravens already in the raven row, which makes it more difficult. Succeeding the second round, the third round is weirder still. In the third round, the players must complete one row of the poem every of Ren's turns. If they fail to do so, they lose. In addition, once all 4 rows are done, the Ant-Man must already match Ren's heart, or again they lose. Now that's challenging, but to help her, any cards that have been relived in previous rounds, so her score pile cards, can be used in addition to any cards taken on her turn to complete those rows, and their abilities work just as before. In addition, if in the last round you relive any memories, not only is that Raven chased away, but any cards underneath it are immediately added to Ren's score pile. If, despite all of that, you get all the way to the end, well then you've won. But there are 6 ways of losing the game, and I need to go through all of them before you're sure you can win. First up, if Feth doesn't play a card on his turn, the players lose. If the Feth doesn't play a card from his memory row into the Ant-Man, the players lose. If at any point, and for whatever reason, the Ant-Man is empty, the players lose. If there are ever all 5 Ravens in the Ravens row, the players lose. And finally, the 2 reasons we just talked about, if Ren doesn't complete a line of her poem in the final round, or the Ant-Man doesn't match her heart when that poem is finished, the players lose. If you manage to get through all of that and avoid all those pitfalls, then you've won the game. In addition to being very smug about that, you may now open the first envelope, which I won't tell you its secrets, but it will progress both the story and the difficulty of the game. And there are 3 envelopes in the box. And that is the Ravens of 3 Sahashri. I hope you found that video useful, and I definitely hope that you enjoy the game. If you want to find out more about the rules or where to find the game to buy, both of those will be linked to in the description. Please subscribe to the Osprey Games YouTube channel, and I hope to see you again.